Hi everyone. In this episode we're going to be going through the second half of exercise 29, which is on Shelmerdine's page 32. This is the end of chapter 6. And I'm starting with the second half in part because this sentence unfortunately would actually be impossible for you to do without reading ahead and learning some things from chapter 7. So I'm going to do a little preview of what we can do to express this difficulty. It is difficult, something that we'll learn in chapter 7 when we learn first and second declension adjectives, but we can skip ahead and at least kind of treat this as a special phrase for now, and then when we actually get to chapter 7, explain it in more fullness, I suppose. Alright, so let's start with number 6. Is it difficult to train the horses with words? So what are we seeing here? Well, this is going to be an infinitive, right? To train, and that's the whole point of this chapter. And then the horses, this is going to be a direct object of that infinitive. Remember, infinitives are verbal nouns. So ultimately they are nouns, but they're like verbs in the sense that they can take a direct object if they're a transitive verb, might have a subject as well. So this is the verbal aspect that we're seeing, that this infinitive is a verb in a sense that's taken this direct object. And then with words, this is going to be one of our new dative usages. This is going to be an instrument or means. That's how these horses are trained, or probably not trained, unless they're Mr. Ed and talking. But alright, so we know how to do the second half of the sentence. Now we need to handle, is it difficult? So if you're a particularly precocious or active student, you might have looked ahead in the appendix or the dictionary of Shelmerdine and seen difficult as a word that's spelled like this, kallepos. And then it's a adjective that also can end with different endings. But let's talk about this infinitive. What is to train? Well, it's paidelwo is the verb that we've learned for teaching, or in this case training, and we learned how to do the infinitive in this chapter, right? Let me make that a slightly smaller ruler. So we take the present stem, this is from our first principal part, and then we add the ending "ain," which was originally epsilon plus epsilon nu. And then we keep the accent on the last syllable of the stem, so paidelwain. That's exactly what we need. That's our present infinitive. So let's just keep this kallepos in mind and go ahead and in blue write out the rest of the sentence, because we can do that. So just focusing right now on to train the horses with words. So again, we'll use this infinitive, paidelwain. And then the horses, this is going to be in the accusative, and the horse is hippos, one of these second declension masculine nouns that we've recently learned in the last chapter. Accent on the initial iota, tous hippus, or tous hippus, again, where we get hippopotamus or other, literally a river horse from. So to train the horses, and now with words. So we could treat words as a class, or we could and include an article like tois, but ultimately that's going to be somewhat optional. But then words, the word for word, as we know, is logos in the nominative, but we need a dative plural here. Plural because words, dative because of instrument. So we can get rid of that nominative ending, go back and try to repair this gamma, and make that a dative plural ending, masculine, tois logos, with words. So to train the horses with words, and then we also have a question mark here, so we can do that in the Greek with one of these semicolons. So let's get back now to kallepos. One of the things that I hope I pointed out when talking about the infinitive is that it actually does have, like a noun, a case number and gender. So in this case it's going to be nominative. Is it difficult to train? This is kind of a subject of sorts. Is it being a linking verb, where we can take a subject nominative, difficult, and put that with our predicate nominative, to train. In fact, technically, to train is the the nominative here, or the subject nominative, but it doesn't matter. What we need to say is that this is nominative and it's going to agree with difficult. So kallepos, this is actually a masculine ending. Infinitives are not only have case, they're always singular, but then they also have gender, and that gender is neuter. It's grammatical, it's just an object, it's an object of speech, it's not a person, it doesn't have a gender. So what we need to do is make this kallepos into the neuter ending, which we'll learn in the next section, so I'll just kind of cheat right now and say kallepon. So kallepon, and then in Greek you can actually skip the verb to be often. You can just put the thing, difficult to train the horses with words, with this to be understood. This to be would actually be written as esti, a proclitic verb. No accent needed when this accent falls here. Actually, it's an enclitic verb, but we're going to get to what all that means in a little while. But for right now, you can forget that this even needs to exist, and we can just say kallepon paideoen tous hippus tois logos. Difficult, is it, in our Yoda speak, to train the horses with words? The answer for this in Greek was probably ne. Well, ne is how they say it in modern Greek, nai, which equals yes. So that's probably our answer. It is difficult to train horses with words. Good. Well, we have already gotten through the impossible question. Numbers 7 through 10 are going to be much easier. I'm going to, just for kicks, change our ink color and see what we can do here. We are sending a letter to the general. We are sending, that's progressive in aspect and present and tense, so this is going to be a present verb built on our first principal part. A letter, well, that's a physical object. That's going to be our direct object in the accusative. And then to the general, this is going to be our dative of recipient or interest. This is our indirect object in the dative. So note we have a letter, so we're not going to need the definite article, but the general is specific, so we will have an article there. So let's start with we are sending. We remember that pempo is the verb I send. So now we need to make this first person plural, and we do this with our now familiar ending amen. We are sending a letter, and we'll remember letter is epistole in the nominative. But now we need to make this accusative, so we add the new, and we can probably assume that since we're going to follow this word with another word, we're going to need to make that final acute a grave, epistolane. And this is, of course, well, it's cognate to epistola in Latin, and this is where we get epistolary as a writing form. This is letter-based, so epistole. Pempamen epistolane, we are sending a letter, and then now to the general. Well, what is the general? In nominative, ho strategos. But again, we don't need the nominative here because the nominative is already tied up in this subject verb. So we need the dative. To is going to be our dative masculine singular article. And then strategos. Nice kind of rhyme there. And because that accent is on the ultimate and we are in the dative, we're going to get that circumflex. So we are sending a letter, not the letter, but just a letter to the general. Nice and straightforward, no tricks there, unlike number 6. Let's move on down to number 8. Maybe get a nice yellow. I ordered. Alright, that's interesting. That's simple past, which for Greek is going to be what? Not the imperfect, but the aorist. The slave. Okay, so this is going to be accusative. So I ordered the slave, to stay. So we're going to get this infinitive. We're getting this indirect command, where what's going to happen is this accusative, the slave, actually becomes the subject of this infinitive. The slave is going to be doing the staying. And where is he going to be doing it? In the marketplace. So we're going to have the preposition en plus the dative word for marketplace. And that's all going to be in this indirect statement that gets, I guess, triggered by our verb of ordering. So what is that verb of ordering? Well, its first principal part is kaleo, I order. but it's not I order, it's I ordered. So we need to do a couple things. Let's take off that ending and that accent to begin with and get back to our stem. Ooh, it's not that. That should be an upsilon, not an epsilon. Kaleu. All right. Now what do we need to do? Well, it's past tense, and this is in the indicative, so we're going to need to add our PIA, our past indicative augment. Just a smooth breathing epsilon. And now this is aorist, so we need to know our third principal part and know that kaleo goes kaleo, kaleoso, and then ekaleosa. So sa would be I ordered, and that's exactly what we need here. Remember that the aorist is always a short alpha, so this is going to send that accent back to the antepenult, the recessive accent on a verb. This is different from most nouns, which tend to have a persistent. Remember also that the infinitive, because it is a noun, has a persistent accent, but that's neither here nor there. We don't have that yet, although we will get it when we get to stay here. So I ordered, perfect, and then we need the slave. This is new vocabulary, well, I guess in chapter 5, and nominative was doulos, but we need to make this accusative now, and we also need to add the article. I forgot about that. So let's put that article in, ton doulon. This accent needs to be a circumflex because that omicron nu is short. But then let me go ahead and get a different color out to mark this indirect command that we're getting started. So this is going to be our command subject. The subject of the whole sentence is first person singular I, and that's contained in this verb and this personal ending. But within this command, we're going to have a subject and then a verb. That command verb is going to be to stay, and it's going to be an infinitive. And then we'll finally have our prepositional phrase. Now, what I'm going to do here, we're going to have a subject, an infinitive, and prepositional phrase. Greeks they might have wanted to put this prepositional phrase before the infinitive, but that's kind of advanced Greek knowledge that we don't really need to put into practice here. So right now I'm just going to follow the English word order and we're going to be fine. So I ordered the slave to remain. And meno is the verb I remain. This is again the first principal part, and that's what we're going to be building off of. We need a kind of progressive aspect infinitive, and that's what the present infinitive is. So let's get rid of that accent, though truth be told we'll be putting it right back. And then we'll put this ain on the infinitive ending, and then the accent goes on the last syllable of the stem. There's only one syllable here, so that's very easy. The slave to remain, now in the marketplace. And what was marketplace? Well, in the nominative, he agora. So then we need to make this now dative singular. So that'll be te, circumflex, then agora. Again, this rho is protecting it. It's one of those letters, epsilon iota rho, from a vowel shift. This is an alpha here versus an eta here, but this is the accented syllable, and it is in the dative, so we have to give it that circumflex. So I ordered, aorist past, simple past tense, first person singular, I ordered, and now this triggers our command phrase, the slave, which becomes the subject, to remain in the marketplace. Excellent. Let's keep on going. It looks like my number 10 might have disappeared. Let's see if I can get back in this text box and bring it out. Don't want to write over it. Ah, there it is. Good. All right. I'll bring it back. There we are. Good. Let's get another color in and see what we can do. They sacrificed to the goddess of the country. Another more straightforward sentence. So they sacrificed. Again, this is going to be our aorist simple past. It's difficult to know, though. In practice, we might say this in English when we meant that they continually sacrificed. But this looks like a simple past for now, so we're going to use the aorist. Imperfect might work there, but let's keep going. To the goddess, so that's going to be a dative of interest, kind of indirect object. Who's receiving the sacrifice? Well, the goddess. And then that's the goddess of the country. So this phrase, of the country, is going to be modifying the goddess, and we're going to have a couple ways of doing that. But let's start off with the verb. So thuo, we know, is our first principal part. But then if we were to go through, it would be thuso in the future, and then ethusa in the aorist, which is what we need here. Simple past. So ethusa is going to be what we're working with. It has the past indicative augment, and then it has that aorist tense marker with the sigma. Not all aorists have that sigma, but many of them do. So we have ethus, this is good, and now we need to say they. And how do we do that in Greek? In the aorist, we do this alpha nu. Again, that's a short alpha. Accent falls back on the anti-penult, the epsilon here, the PIA, past indicative augment. So lots of terminology, but we don't really need to worry about it. Sorry, that short mark looked a little bit like a circumflex. That was just to show that that was a short alpha, not a circumflex. So ethusan, they sacrificed. Now to the goddess. So that's dative, feminine, accent on the alpha in the nominative. This epsilon again, protecting us from the vowel shift. So we can give that a circumflex. Thea, they sacrificed to the goddess. Now we've got a problem. We need to somehow show that of the country is modifying the goddess. Well, we have two ways of doing that, and I've already kind of skipped one, and that's to sandwich, right? To put between the goddess, we could say of tes, the country, koras. But another way, so this is one way of doing it. Another way is to repeat that article, and it needs to be in the same case number gender as it was preceding the noun. So te thea, the goddess. Now te, this almost acts as a relative clause. I'm going to kind of do a dotted line here because it's not a true relative clause. But it is saying, well, we're describing this goddess further. It functions very much like a relative clause, giving us further details about this noun. So the goddess, the one of the country. Again, tes koras. Nice class B, first declension, feminine noun. Great. So let me clean up a little bit. Again, that was a viable option when we sandwiched, but now we're just going to do this second option where we repeat the article and give further details. So they sacrificed, simple past, aorist, third person plural, to the goddess, the one of the country. Good. And finally, number 10. Now that we have it here, let's see, let's get a nice kind of red. The soldier persuades the young men to march. So this is going to be our infinitive, and then this will be our subject. Persuades, this is a present tense verb. The young men, remember this is neanias in the nominative, a first declension masculine noun. And then we have this bit of another kind of phrase of command, or in this case persuasion, where the young men are going to become the subject of march, even though they are in the accusative, because they're also the direct object of persuasion. Alright, but let's start off with the soldier. So soldiers tend to be masculine in Greek, but again, this is a first declension noun. So remember from your dictionary, it is ho stratiotes. And that's the nominative form, and we need the nominative here, so we don't need to change anything. Ho stratiotes persuades. We remember that the verb to persuade is peitho, but that is, again, first person, I am persuading. So he, she, it persuades, third person singular, it's going to be peithe. Ho stratiotes peithe, the young men, so plural and with a direct or definite article. Tous neanias. And remember, this is the accusative plural, but for these first declension masculine nouns, that looks identical to the nominative. So here I was really writing ho neanias, but tous neanias looks basically the same. It is the same. That nu looked a bit like an upsilon. So ho stratiotes pethe tous neanias, to march. Well, what's march? It's all related, this strat thing. So stratelo was our first principal part, I am marching. But now we need to make that an infinitive. So we drop the personal ending, we add the infinitive ending, ain. And then this is a persistent accent, but it always falls on the last syllable of the stem, so we're perfect. We don't need to change a thing. Hos stratiotes, pethe, tus neanias, strateoen. Well, that should do it. Hope that was helpful, and I'll see you for Chapter 7 next time. Take care.